cannot not write. You need to develop the craft of writing if you're really going to do well in seminary, but even do well in the life of the church. So it's important that we develop this craft. So we jump into this idea of what is theological reflection and what is reflective writing. So number one, the writer, which is you, are the one who is reflecting. So when they're asking, I want you to write a reflective paper on ... Or maybe write, here's a good example, write a reflective paper on when you first encountered Christ, when you were born again, when you were saved. You have to reflect and think on that. That's not something that comes out, but you're asked to sort of look at yourself in a mirror and look at a historical part of your life and to think about it. Where were you? What were you experiencing? Was there a crisis going on in your life? And so reflecting is asking you to do all of that. So what I wrote here is to reflect is to mirror yourself, to see what you are thinking about an experience, an event, a question, or subject in light of theological imagination. I asked a question before, what is seminary? Didn't want the critical one. I wanted a theological reflection on that. And that's what you were providing. I've been in church and I want to, delve into it. There's an educative component. There's a heartfelt component. There's a language component. That's reflecting on this question. The next thing is that theological reflection requires theological imagination. It means that it's your mind actively thinking, questioning, dreaming, creating, construing, constructing, critiquing, speaking, the list goes on. But more important, and writing in the language of theology. That means you have to think. It's not something that comes to you and you automatically start, but it requires you to slow down. I think we can all agree that in today's life, we have to do things quickly. We don't have no time. But theological reflection requires us to slow down. Maybe it's requiring us to slow down the same way we ask congregations to slow down, to take time out of your week to come join all of us, to worship, to join in a liturgy that calls us to slow down and reflect, to hear a sermon, to hear something that spiritually enlightens us and that moves us, so that it activates our imagination, that it reminds us that God exists in the world. The third point, theological reflection appeals to experience on a particular issue, question, or problem. That means you have some experience with it, right? It's personal reflection. Appeals to experience, that is to a particular issue, question, problem, or text that we're trying to make sense of as the starting point of reflection. And then the last point is to engage in a creative process characterized by problem solving and ending with proclamation. 3 points. There's 3 pieces there. A creative process, problem solving, and proclamation. And we'll break down these 3 pieces. But any good reflective essay, any good reflective writing has these 3 components. The process of being creative, which is the thinking part. Problem solving, the reason why problem solving is because we're really answering a question that's been given to us. Who is Jesus to you? What is the problem of sin and evil? Right? And then there's some part of proclamation, and proclamation is, for us at this moment, by way of writing. Okay. Any questions so far? Any questions so far? No? Okay. All right. That seems easy enough. Okay, so here we go. The creative process. What's in the creative process? In the creative process, we're identifying a question that comes out of our experience. Right? So that means when we're looking at an experience or looking at an event, a problem arises or a question comes out of that. The second part in that creative process is describe that experience in writing to identify the question. If I were to formulate that, when I was 5 years old, my father and I were driving home from church, and we were talking about who Jesus was. And after speaking with him at that moment, I asked Jesus into my life. But the question that was most important for me is, who is Jesus? So my experience, the experience of my life, right, an experience that happened that was concrete, introduces and informs this question of, who is this Jesus? Or maybe it could bring in a different question. What does salvation mean, right? What does it mean to be saved? How were you saved? What is its value and its importance? The third component of that is taking your experience and correlating it. That means, making some connections with the question and the question itself with Christian tradition, stories, and symbols. Does my story relate to anyone else that may be in the Christian walk? Maybe I might relate it to Paul and his conversion experience. Maybe I could relate it, to Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus or Zechariah, the short man that was on the tree, and Jesus comes and reaches out to him and has a conversation. Maybe the woman at the well who was there by herself, and Jesus walked up to her and introduces himself. That moment I was introduced to Jesus. The fourth part is constructing a new imagination, a new image of the experience that emerges from the writing process. So we've already now filled in this event and saying, God was there. There's something important about that event that shapes me now. And this is just being creative, right? We're not even getting to the writing the crux of, or the order of writing. This is just reflecting, right? Reflecting on an event, reflecting on a question, and trying to see what connections do we see in scripture? What connections do we see in our Christian tradition by way of theology, Aquinas' theology, St. Augustine's theology, maybe process thought, maybe if we wanted to talk about depth psychology and theology, we want to look at those traditions as we reflect on it. And then from there, we're constructing something new, right? We're putting things together and constructing something new. Okay, the next part of that reflective writing is problem solving. Could someone read this piece right here?
Yes, I'll read it.
Go for it.
What the phrase theological reflection seems to add to the notion of theology as such is an explicit intention to bring actual current experience to bear on an understanding of Christian symbols so that they may in turn illumine actual experience and practice. For this reason, theological reflection frequently transpires as some form of problem solving.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I want to turn on my laser pointer. What does this mean? To bring actual current experience to bear on an understanding of Christian symbols. How would you just do that? Anybody want to take a wager as to what does it mean that take our experience and bring it to bear on an understanding of Christian traditions and symbols?
I think that all these ideas that we have about God and these symbols, they don't take meaning until they're actually applied to your life or through some experience. Because before that, there's words, there's directions, instructions. But once in your life, you can have a Lot moment or something like that, or a David moment, is when these things, are real.
Thank you, Sante. That's great. Yeah. So when you're doing construction, they're saying there's a load bearing. How much can you push, put pressure on something or put weight onto something? But to bear means that you're leaning on something, right? We're bearing the load of our experience and trying to say, where is God in all this? And that's a creative component. So Sante, like you're saying, they're just words or they're just experiences unless we start putting them together. Unless we start asking the question, where was God, right? What does this mean for this, right? Taking our experiences, taking the actual day-to-day experiences, taking our current events, and then looking at our Christian traditions and seeing and trying to solve a problem. And saying, can we make sense of this by looking at our sacred texts, looking at our Christian traditions? What are some ways that we can respond to it? This mode of thinking is called problem solving. We're looking at our current experience and then explaining and analyzing that problem, right? We're out of that experience, we're seeing something that needs to be talked about. And to explain and analyze, we're sort of like just looking around it. We're analyzing it and looking at it. We're reflecting on the problem in conversation with Christian tradition in problem solving. We're devising proposals for a solution to the problem, which may reinterpret our traditions, right? We may have looked at it one way before, but now since we've analyzed it and we're devising some solutions, we're reinterpreting our tradition, we're reinterpreting memories, we're reinterpreting our actual experience to reform and reinvigorate the work that we're doing. And then in problem solving, we're concluding with an appeal to the reader to talk about the gravity of the problem and the urgency of providing a solution. So the first aspect of creative, of reflective writing, sorry about that. Let me see if I can go back, was the creative component. There's also a problem solving component, which is followed by proclamation. Now we've all heard this word before. Proclamation means, we've probably heard it in preaching, right? To proclaim, proclamation, to proclaim, to preach. But writing is a form of proclamation. So I would like someone to read this part right here. Can someone read it?
What?
William? Yes. Okay, thank you.
What is invoked here is the powerful proclamation of a writer's voice. But we are listening for another voice that might, if we stay respectfully out of the way, inspire and authenticate what we are given to say in the face of the mystery that inspires us. To write theological reflection is ultimately to give voice to that voice by writing in your own voice in hope that it will reflect the mystery that inspires it.
Thank you. Thank you. Writing, this part for me is beautiful. To write theological reflection is ultimately to give voice to that voice by writing in your own voice. Does anyone know what icons are? If we look at the Greek Orthodox tradition, they have icons, which are drawings, paintings. The icons themselves, the people go to it and they reflect on it, and you probably see them there for a long period of time, just looking at it and praying towards it. And you can get a sense like, oh my gosh, it seems like they're worshiping that icon, that image, that painting, but it's not. The icon, the way it's drawn and its purpose is always to look beyond it. It's an image, but it's calling us to look at something else beyond it. It's forcing us to reflect on the divine God in that actual experience and event. And to say, and to think, oh, that God that was there is the God that is also here. In writing, in theological reflection, you're doing that. You're giving voice by using your own voice in hopes that when someone reads it, that mystery that you're trying to let out, the people will see that mystery which is God, right? You're hoping that in your writing, someone's going to get that aha moment and say, man, yes, God was there. You're hoping that in your sermon writing, right, that it's not just an argument or a plea, but that in your speaking of that sermon that you've written in your voice, that they hear the voice of God. And that's what theological writing is. Theological reflective writing is. Now, I've also written down something here, because since you are in seminary, the ultimate reality is that writing a theological reflection paper is something that really satisfies you and the professor. Because the professor is the one that's going to be looking at it, right? The professor is the one that's asking you to write this theological reflection paper. And it's the professor who is also going to read it. And so right now, what you need to focus on is that this reflection paper has to satisfy both you in getting your points across, but it also satisfies the professor so that you get a good grade. There's the sobering part, right? There's where I'm intermixing the spiritual with the realities of the academic rigor. And just so you know, I will write notes, but I might be able to provide this afterwards. But please write notes, because writing notes is different than getting this. So let's jump to that task. The task of writing, the task of getting these points across, of thinking and writing. To do any type of writing, you always have to do something called pre-writing. And this part is probably one of the things that we often tend to skip over. What's this first part? Read the assignment. Okay? What do you think that means? What do you think I mean when I say read the assignment?
It means read the assignment 3 times.
That's right. Or 4.
Which I don't do, but that's what it means.
It's funny because I think we jump into a syllabus scared or anxious because we're trying to figure out, oh my gosh, I have to work. I have to probably deal with family. and I'm also in school, which means I have to write probably like 15 papers, and we're putting everything together in this one box, and we fail to read or to slow down and really look at what's being asked of us.
Sure.
And in all reality, when you're coming into a classroom for the first time with that professor, the reason why they break down the syllabus is because they really want you to slow down, and they want you to take an account of what we're doing in the classroom for the semester. And part of that is reading the assignment. When you read the assignment 3 times, as you said, 3 times, but look at my fingers. 3 times. I got an extra one for the Holy Spirit. You got to read the assignment. It's to get an understanding of what's being asked of you. Maybe even to ask the question to the professor so you get a good understanding, or at least begin to. So read the assignment. Some of my experience with students, they said, the professor gave me a bad grade. But when we read the assignment, they said, I did not know I needed to do that. But that's life. I mean, that's real. That's real. That's real. I just wanted to say that that's real, and you're probably not the only one. It's important that we read the assignment. The second thing is to reflect on the task. And reflecting is some of those pieces that I talked about before. Okay, I know what the assignment is. Now I need to think about how am I going to do it. I need to think about maybe setting out the time I need. So reflecting on the task at hand, if the professor says, oh, it's a critical paper. Well, if I don't know what a critical essay paper is, then I better find out what a critical essay is. If it's a reflective essay, I better find out what a reflective essay. If it's a theological research paper, I better find out if I do not know. So it's asking yourself the questions. Do I know all the pieces that the professor is asking of me, of this task? That's reflecting on the task. Preparing, getting the materials together, making sure you have, and I'm going to say this right now, finding a place to write, making sure you have your technical stuff that you have all together, maybe that you have access to the digital theological library, that you have access to the books that the professor has given for the class, but also maybe some extra books that you might want to look at because you have been reflecting on what this assignment is. All of those are necessary for any pre-writing task, for anything you do.
No.
Say again? Santea? Was that you? Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
No, were you saying something, Santea? That's why I was. All right.
Yes, please.
Oh, okay.
I would love that.
Oh, okay.
And I'll cook for you. Yeah, I figured I will. Listen, look, hold on. So I know you think I just be saying words. I think I found the recipe for the meal you like.
Oh, I think Santea is on.
Because I know you.
There you go. I muted Santea. She's talking about recipes. Maybe that's a good idea. That's a great analogy to do a recipe. You have to prepare beforehand. So make sure you have everything you need for the writing. Okay. So now we're getting into the nitty-gritty, everybody. The first part for any reflective essay or paper is free writing. And look at this thought. If I waited for perfection, I would never write a word. This is a great example of what free writing is. Free writing is literally just writing freely of what you want to say. Really thinking about that question. If I were to put it plainly, if I were to ask you the question, who is Jesus to you? Then the goal of your free writing is to just start writing. What do I think Jesus means? Right? So the purpose of free writing is to help find out what you want to say and what you do not want to say. you want to reread what you have written. Then the task of free writing, after you've written it, you want to reread what you've written to begin to see some thoughts and ideas that will shift your writing to respond to the assignment. Look at that. First, you free write to know what you want to say and what you don't want to say. But when you reread it, now you start getting some thoughts and ideas that come out of it, right? And that will begin to shift your writing. Then here's an important part. Free writing is not your final draft. Oftentimes we write, but we write as if that's our final draft. We tend to not have 2 or 3 different drafts. And that's a big no-no, right? Because free writing is rough. It's short in places, meaning there's not much meat to it. And then you need to expound on it a bit more. And in reality, it's just an inner monologue. You might be using terms and words that you probably shouldn't use or in the writing to the professor or to the reader. You might be speaking in your inner voice when you need to use the academic terms or the language of the space that you're in. Like Paula mentioned, there is a language to theology. There is a language to, when you're in a class on Intro to Theology. There's a language when you're in a youth ministry course, and you're looking at religious education. They have their own language. But the reason why free writing is important is because once you've written it down, you start to get these ideas that form that you can now use for your real writing. It becomes a bridge to what you want to say. I want to pause here. Are there any questions on this? Any questions? No? It's clear? Okay. That's clear. Okay, I'll move on then. After you've free written and you've got these ideas, you want to begin outlining. Okay? Outlining in its most basic sense is an introduction, the body of your work, and then a conclusion. But this is what outlining does. It allows a preliminary path, right? You create an outline from your free writing and you get this, okay, this is what I want to write. And then it progresses your thoughts, right? Here's point A, here's point B, here's point C, here's point D. The outline works well when you have an idea already of what you want to write, but you have to flesh it out a bit more, right? So here's, if I can pause for a moment, would anyone be willing to tell me what one of their assignments are? Oh, anyone? One of their papers? Warren?
Well, I have to write a paper on urban leadership in the Marla program, outlining what would be the steps for transformation in our urban context.
Whew.
Yeah.
That's heavy, man. I wasn't prepared for that one.
Oh, that's Professor Johnson.
Oh, anyone got anything easier? Just kidding. So then, well, I think you have, I mean, do you have any ideas on what you're writing?
Well, yeah, what I've figured out is probably the person that has written the most on this is Gil Randall.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm actually using Randall and a couple other theologians, scholars to focus in on 3 points because it is such a wide field. So, but my central point is, how do I, as a church leader, bring about this transformation within the context of either a congregation, or in my case, it would be a whole presbytery of 98 churches.
So you're doing sort of like a research paper. So
Yes.
this is slightly out of, this is a reflective paper, but nevertheless, there's components in there that we can use. So you already have this idea of what the problem is, right?
Yes.
Okay, what's the problem in particular?
The problem in particular is there's been no transformation of the church's either in the growth or, more importantly, developing or assisting in discipleship and in their beliefs within the congregation. Church officers come in, they serve 3-year terms, and they're the same on day one as they are on their last day.
Okay, great. So that's good. So you've given me an event or an experience that really has what the question that you're trying to answer there. All right. So for me, if I would tell you that we need to free write a bit, grab what those central ideas or points are, and that's going to be your intro. Let me go here. This is going to be your intro. Your intro is going to state what your problem is and what you're trying to do in your work. And then the body of your work is what they say first point, second point, third point, now becomes the research that you're doing. Some of the authors and what they're saying, right? I'm looking at this author, and this author talks about these 3 points, and why is it valuable for the research that I'm doing? And in doing so, towards the end, you start providing what are possible solutions to this problem that you're having. All right. Because you have this idea in mind, because you have this experience that you're thinking about, it does help your outline, because it starts to shape what your paper looks like. I have a problem, I need a solution to this problem. And so I need to do the research that falls in between it to get a response. So like right here, the outline works well when you have an idea of what you want to write, but need to flesh it out. So you and Warren, just as a side note, and this is what you'll probably be doing with the group, that the task of writing that experience down as a free write, and then looking at it again and saying, what's the real concern I have here, is what's going to lead to that good introduction, the thesis of your work. Okay. Mm-hmm. So thinking, just looking through this, that, outlining it helps us to become exploratory, to look at it, to reflect on it, to change and reject the outline or shift it around. So outline now becomes saying, here's the points, and I could work it around and make changes. I'm going to show you, I'm going to give you an example a little bit later on of a manuscript I'm working on and how I lay out or outline my work as an example. But I'll do that a little bit later because I'm looking for it. Okay. So the second part after free writing, from free writing comes structured writing. And it's a little bit of what I did there. We did an outline, but now we're structuring our writing. Like we did with you, Warren, I'm redefining the question or the topic in the introduction. Look at what the introduction does. It orients the reader. It identifies the focus or the purpose. And then I give an outline of what I'm doing in my writing, outlining the scope of my work by stating the thesis, right? Why is structured writing important? Because it's discarding any unnecessary material. When I was free writing, I was just like rambling on. But when I start doing my structured writing, there's pieces I don't need for my free writing that I'm just gonna have to let go and really get to the nooks and crannies, the good nuggets that I need to develop. Develops a form for the remainder of the content. What that means is, hey, I have a sentence here, I have a sentence here, and I have a sentence here. Now I just need to fill it in, right? So I could put, well, I want to argue this here, or I want to look at this author on this point. I don't have time at the moment because I'm still building it. Or I really want to talk about this right now because it's in my head. But it gives me a form or a space so that I can start writing in it. Consider it as like a bowl that you're going to get back to later and start filling it in with materials. That's what the structure does. It's like a placeholder. I usually put headers when I write, and then the headers help me to fill in. Okay, I got to go back to this header and write this out. The structured writing then helps with that. Okay. Structured writing develops the essay with the structure into a coherent narrative with a beginning, middle, and end. What you always want to do with your writing is that it's coherent, that is telling a story. If I can use Warren's case, there's a problem in the church on leadership, and he wants to change that. He's looking at these leaders that are informing the topic of his research, and then at the end, he's developing a response on how he can improve it. But that's a coherent narrative. He's not saying, here's a problem in the church, Mary had a little lamb, and that's why we need to change the church. The pieces don't come together. The task of structured writing is to make it all come together. You want to look at its flow. Does it flow well? Is it telling what I really want to write about and tell and speak to what I really want to speak about? Questions on this part? No? Okay. Gonna move on.
I have a question, please.
I do.
Okay, I'll pause. So Kathy first, then Paula?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I have a question, right, about my paper. I was on mute, so I was speaking, and that's how Warren got in front of me. But anyway, so
Sorry.
No, it's not. It's me. I'm off mute now. But anyway, it's a question, and I just like it's not a problem. It's a question. Okay, I'm gonna give it to you. It says, in light of the critical discourse and the assigned readings, how does your local church respond and frames Christian ethics? So, 4 to 6 pages, double space. And my problem was, which in light of this discussion, I'm probably wrong. In the way I was looking at it, I said, I'm supposed to write 4 to 6 pages on how my church respond and frames Christian ethics, and not exactly knowing everything about Christian ethics. So I'm trying to read it, what it's about, and figuring out, do I just say, okay, my church does this, does that according to the outline you just put up there, which I shucked that idea. So I didn't know how to tackle that question. And so that's where I am.
Okay. So when we get into our groups, we're going to talk about this a little bit more deeply and not in this part, because I'm just presenting.
Yeah.
But I would ask a couple of questions. You need to break down that question. So you're in a Christian ethics class, and so the professor has definitely taught you something about Christian ethics. So you know something about Christian ethics. That's the first piece. I'm not asking you that. I'm telling you already know something about Christian ethics. But I'm thinking, I'm still a little bit lost, this idea of the critical discourse. I don't know what you've read or done, so I can't answer that part. We would have to sit down and start talking about what is the critical discourse, or that central piece that the professor's talking about there. Mm-hmm. How does your church frame their Christian ethics? And because Christian ethics is how do we live, right? It's right. That practical day-to-day stuff, right? Mm-hmm. If we see a homeless man out in the street in front of our church, what are we going to do about it? That's an ethical question. It's not a theological. We're not going to go into a theological inquiry. What does God say? No, now we're asking the real hardcore questions, the practical parts. How does the church respond to it, and how do they frame their ethics in order to be able to respond to that in real life? Once that's why it's important to do the first task of reading the assignment and understanding what professor wants. I would really ask you, if you didn't know that you have to ask the professor so that they can give you an idea of really what they're looking for. And then from there, this outline is actually very general. This outline works on pretty much everything you do. There's always an intro, there's always a middle body, and there's always a conclusion. I've been talking about reflecting, but this one is a little bit different. This is actually a critical paper that you're speaking to. So it's just slight changes to how we go through it. But this writing piece is always going to be like this. So anyway, like that. So I would just say, just email your professor and say, hey, I just need some help breaking this assignment down a bit. I want to make sure that what I'm thinking is what you're asking for.
Right.
And the professor will be more than happy to respond to you on that.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. But I mean, that's, I mean, if you're not, you have to be in the ethics class to answer this question. And I don't know what the professor is teaching at the moment to respond to it. Okay. Thank you so much, Kathy, for that. Paula?
Yes, I wanted to go back to the top. How do you start? Sometimes I get so confused with the thesis sentence.
Okay. Writing introductions. That's what it is. You're writing the introduction or writing the thesis statement. As I think, you know what? If I can go back a couple of slides here. So Paula, what do you understand as a thesis statement?
That's what I'm telling you. I'm confused. I don't know where I'm supposed to begin with it.
So I'm going to ask you again. What do you think a thesis statement means? You can't say you're confused. I'm asking you what you think.
What
you can't
I think.
Say confused. Yeah. What you have to come at it somehow. When a professor told you that, what were you thinking it meant?
I guess what I'm going to talk about, right?
What's the central topic of your paper? Yes. The thesis statement is going to tell the reader who is reading your paper what it is that you want to talk about. And so I came here because when you free write, you're going to start to get thoughts and ideas that help you get at the center of your topic. And that's what the thesis statement becomes. The thesis statement is, what do you want to write about?
And that can go anywhere. It can go in the beginning, the middle, and the end, or the end.
No, your thesis statement is always in your introduction.
Okay.
The thesis statement is always in the introduction. It gets expounded upon in your writing, what we call the body of your work. Right, your thesis statement is always in your introduction. It gets expounded upon in the body of your work, and then it gets restated in your conclusion.
Okay. I just need a clarity because I had this I took a writing class, and she was telling me it didn't have to be in the beginning. So it confused me totally, and I was like, oh, I thought it had to go in the introduction. But you're saying it goes in all three.
So I'm going to repeat it so as we're clear. It begins, yes, you have to state your thesis in your introduction. Okay. Now,
and
when it's
in the body,
it gets expounded upon in the body. What I mean by that is, okay, here's what I want to argue, or here's what I want to say, but now I have to start proving it or making sense of it, of why I'm saying what I'm saying. And that happens in the body of the sentence. And then your third part is I'm restating or reiterating that thesis statement or the argument I want to make in my conclusion.
Okay, totally clear.
And then I also want to say that your thesis statement does not need to be the first sentence of your introduction.
Okay.
And I think an approach to writing your introduction, and I got this is why I like the seminary student writes on writing instructions, that your introduction could be what you call a funnel paragraph. So what is a funnel paragraph? It begins with a broad statement, narrows down through sentences that follow until the central idea of the paper is expressed.
Yes.
So that means you can begin with a broad statement and come down to your thesis statement, which is the central idea. I have an example here, as a matter of fact. Okay, I'll read it to you.
Yeah.
New medical technologies are raising many troubling issues today. That's a broad statement.
Mhm.
Now they're going to start funneling in. Doctors are able to save lives in ways unheard of just a few years ago. Now look at that. So they went from here and now they're defining it a little bit more. We went from medical technologies and what doctors are able to do. But now they're going to introduce what a problem is. But these medical miracles do not come without cost. And today, many questions emerge about who gets care and how much care is appropriate. You see how they start to funnel down? Even though these new medical technologies are great, right?
Yeah.
There's cost issues, right? Now, look what they've done. It's this beautiful. This is beautiful. Among the most troubling issues is the question of neonatal care for very premature babies. That's the real problem that the writer wants to get at. This paper will look at the ethical issues involved in saving the lives of those infants. This is the main topic of her work, of his or her work. But they started with a very broad statement. They're saying there's a connection here. The medical technologies, as beautiful as they are, and they're wowing us, there's a hidden issue or dilemma, and I want to lift up that issue. And that issue, oops, sorry about that. And that issue is the caring of premature babies because of cost issues. If we're putting all this money on the new technologies, we're not putting money in the lives of human beings.
Right.
And so I want to look at some of the ethical issues that are involved in saving the lives of these infants. And that becomes her discussion for the rest of the paper.
Okay.
Did that help out a little bit?
Yes, it totally gave me clarity.
Okay. I'm glad. Okay. And Santea Briggs wrote, it's an opening statement that ties into the question you are addressing. Thank you for that, Santea. Yes. Great point. All right. So what's the body of the paper? Paragraphs, right? Writing paragraphs. Paragraphs, if we were to think about what they are, they're units of thought, right? You write a paragraph, it's a thought. They're clusters of sentences that support your ideas that you're bringing out in your paragraphs. And it always begins with a central idea to be supported, right? So it goes, the central idea to be supported tends to be in the beginning of the paragraph, but the central idea may also bind together several paragraphs. I think I mentioned before with Warren's piece that he can have an idea or a heading, but that heading is a central idea that he's connecting multiple paragraphs with, excuse me. Sorry about that. So he can have this thought on, this one central idea as a heading, and then he can have multiple paragraphs that talk about that central idea that moves forward. And in the body of your paragraph, you need to have multiple points that relate to the whole of your essay, right? So looking back at here, if this student who's writing on the ethical issues, they're just not providing one point, but they're providing several points and explaining it and breaking it down. Yes, that strengthen or that bring awareness, number one, to the issue. And argues for her case that we need to do something about it. Okay, and that's what the role of the paragraphs are, the body of the paper is for. And then the last part is the concluding paragraph or the conclusion.
Oh, wow.
Okay, that's as important as the introduction.
Can you go
and
back?
That's as
Yeah.
Sorry.
okay.
Yeah, right, because he just switched that back. Supported.
Okay. All right, I'm going to move forward. I can definitely, whatever's missing, just let me know and I can send that to you. So we can do that. It's just that with the time we have, I want to be able to get the rest of it done. The concluding paragraph is, like I mentioned before, it's restating the thesis, but it's more than that. All writing needs an effective ending. One of the things that you want to do is think about where the writing has led to. All right. Probably it's restating certain ideas in a very brief way to culminate at what does this lead to, right? If I'm looking at the ethical issues and I've been pointed out what the problems are, it leads to something. I want you to be aware of something. I want you to get to this point that you need to maybe invest money, or you need to start advocating for the lives of premature babies, right? From that initial piece. And so that comes out at the conclusion of your work. And so it could be thought of in this way. What is the logical outcome of the essay that you've written? Maybe another question is, how do you want to affect your reader? And what ending will best accomplish that goal? Right? These are the questions you want to ask in writing the concluding paragraph, because that's what it has to boil down to. Here's my statement, my thesis statement, or what I want to argue in the beginning, in my introduction. Here are my arguments, or here are my reasons as to why it's important. And now at the end, I want to reinstate that this is very important, that we need that this topic is really important. I need you to be aware of it. I need you to move into some action. I need it to change your way of thinking. That's what that concluding paragraph ends up doing. All right.
Okay.
One of the things about concluding paragraphs, it looks to future thought. It wants to ask the reader to consider the outcomes related to that topic that you're talking about, to your subject matter. It's explaining the significance of what you've discussed or argued. Why is this issue so important? What are the implications? And so you're kind of trying to put it all together for the reader, right? You've sort of been guiding this reader on this argument, right? Here's my topic. Here's some great reasons. And you need to finish that guiding guiding the reader to the end point. You want to guide or put it all together for the reader, not to insult them, but to show them the connections in your work. So I have this long piece, and this is a conclusion to something I had written a while ago, and I kind of wanted to use it as an example. This is a long conclusion. Sometimes students just write one paragraph and that's enough. It's ended up being about maybe a page for a conclusion of a chapter. So I'll read it and I'll tell you what I was thinking about as I was developing my chapter. He goes, Karkanian's Christian theology in the pluralistic world is a work of love, showing his passion in the detail of his work. In truly desiring authentic engagement, he synthesized the various Christian themes within systematic, constructive, liberative, reformed, and liberal values in evangelical theology. He has also invited the other into hospitable dialogue by being sensitive to the proclivities of other religious traditions, as well as his own. His view of the divine and the Trinitarian formula of God is tantamount to his understanding of religious engagement, and that engagement is not hostile, but hospitable. As the divine so opens to the world, the Christian tradition so too is open to engagement by way of a journey. Now, all I've done there was reiterate what he's done. So this is his work. And I just sort of, in my conclusion, I'm giving you a quick run through of what his work was trying to accomplish. As I reflect on his work, I do have a question that I'm left wondering. Hospitality in its richness, as held within a Trinitarian mode of invitation. So hospitality, invitation, in response and engagement, still has not dealt with the culmination with hospitality and engagement. And this is where I lead the reader into what I wanted to say in my paper. I propose that it is what Whitehead speaks of when he speaks of mutual immanence, which is this gathering, that one no longer thinks on one's own, but thinks with the two or three. One no longer rejects the other, but works within them. That is why, instead of deterministic statements that are affront to thought, becomes now styles of engagement. As we progress, we move towards a unity of religions, a history of human engagement with God. In order to do this, however, it is imperative that we act in the space of hospitality, engaging in authentic relationships by way of witness and response, taking the other seriously as well as our own. This ultimately leads to the creative advance, imaginative generalization that has depth and width, that creates, once again, a space for hospitality, dialogue, and engagement. It was long, probably didn't get everything, but I moved from what the author was saying to what I wanted to say, where I see an opening, to what it leads to. And what I'm doing is I'm leading the reader in the conclusion to this thought and idea, what he wants to determine, and some points that we need to think about as we continue to look at his work and see some issues that we can work on. This is what the conclusion is trying to do, right? Everything you've talked about happens in this one moment, and getting them to a point of, man, that's right. This is what we do need to think about. This is what we do need to talk about or continue to talk about. So that was just an example of that. Any questions? Any questions? Okay. Okay. So then after you've written your body paragraph, after you've done your introduction and conclusion, you're not finished yet. If you thought you finished your writing, you're not done yet. You have to do what is called a final draft. All right. So after you've written what you've wanted to say and you've been cleaning it up, now you have to write it so that others will want to read it. Your paper has to be reader-centered, not self-centered, right? This is what I want to say. You have to look, now you have to start thinking, well, how am I going to effectively communicate to the audience that I'm writing to what I want to say? And so then what part of your task is to read what you've written and ask if there are any gaps that need to be filled. Did I miss out on something? Do I need to include anything else in there? The final goal is to really anticipate issues and problems and respond to it by filling it in. Maybe when you were reading it over, you found some errors and you need to correct those errors. I will tell you that as a professor, one of the things that bother me is that there's a lot of grammatical errors. Yet we have Microsoft Word, or we have Grammarly, or spelling errors. Those parts really affect how someone reads your paper. As a matter of fact, probably a professor will stop reading your paper if they see too many errors. Because at this day and age, there really is no excuse because of so many tools that we have are at our disposal to correct errors. You know, maybe there's certain ones that we miss, but if there's so many, that could be a turnoff. That means it wasn't reader-centered. That means you wrote it and you didn't finish the whole process of writing. Just wanted to make that note and mention. And so then the key to success is revising your writing, right? That final draft. Does my writing do what the assignment asked of me? Does my writing prove the point or carry the topic as I intended? Does my writing move in a clear, organized pattern with an effective beginning and end? Have I left out important points or major supporting ideas? And then another question is, have I wandered off my topic in distracting ways? Sometimes you can write and just go to the left or the right and not focus on the topic. And so you want to read and rewrite your final draft and cleaning those spaces up. And finally, ask these questions. Is it clear? Is it concise? Is it coherent, right? Does it flow? Is it considerate? Am I using the proper language? Does it consider the authors that I'm writing on, in an effective way? Making sure I'm not bashing them or anything like that. And is it correct, right? And correct is really like grammar, spelling, sentence structures and stuff like that. And that's the last piece of the presentation. So it could be, we could say, oh my gosh, this is so daunting. But I think being in seminary calls us to practice the art of writing. And the more we write, the better we become at it. And the more effective that we can speak through it. And so that's why it's so valuable that from day one, that you practice the art of writing. And in this particular one, reflective writing. Even if you're in your fourth year or your third year, your final year, starting the practice of writing is so valuable to you and will be so important because of what it will give you in the future as you're preparing sermons, as you're reflecting on, doing biblical studies, doing biblical work, and, that art, theological reflection. You don't know. Someday someone's gonna ask you to write something, a piece in a book, or an opinion piece that goes in a newspaper, or an opinion piece that goes into a blog that's going to be important. It's going to be read by many. And having this tool under your belt will be essential. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to open it up to any questions you may have before anything else. Any questions?
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, there's no sorry. This is what it's for. Questions.
It might be a little bit off the topic, but it was concerning what you wrote, right? So the first paragraph that you said was the conclusion, like you had like three, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the first part to me was like it read like an endorsement that somebody would write concerning a book.
Okay, continue.
Right. So I was wondering if it's possible to figure out what your paper was about based on that paragraph.
You'd have to use all three to figure out what I was writing. So yeah, the conclusion, all three of them is so yes.
Okay. Well, three of them, right.
Yeah.
Right.
A portion of my chapter was reiterating some of his work. The second paragraph talks about the space that I begin to, that's my critique of him, sort of like, this is something you haven't thought of.
But what was your paper about? Or was it a paper? Or was it?
Yes, it was a chapter reflecting on this author's 5-volume work. So this is a 5-volume work. So thank you about asking.
Okay.
So this book here, Christian Theology in a Pluralistic World, is a 5-volume work by Karkanen. And what he does is he tries to look at evangelical theology and all these other theologies to develop something called a global theology. And
how many pages was your paper? Was your thing a paper or was it a chat? Was it a paper?
It was a chapter.
What you wrote was a chapter.
Yes, I'm only giving you my conclusion.
Yeah.
Okay, and so this is his work, and part of my writing was looking over his work. But then the second paragraph tells you what piece that needs to be talked about more, right? And then at the end saying what it really ends up being about. So I'm being nice. I didn't want to. This is my first time writing a chapter, so you kind of want to be nice. The considerate part of the draft of revising your work, but really saying, hey, dialogue isn't enough. There's this part that we have to think about, which is I'm not going to use my thoughts and ideas over anyone else's, but when I speak with other people, they affect how I think. And that comes out in this part. I proposed that what Whitehead speaks of when he speaks of mutual immanence, then one no longer thinks on one's own, but thinks with the two or three. One no longer rejects the other, but works within them. And that's the level of religious engagement that I envision, but I see missing in his work. That's
So what you gave us was the entirety of your paper?
No.
Oh, okay.
This was just a conclusion.
Right,
This
of your paper.
would have been over as 20 some odd pages. That's what I'm saying. This is just a conclusion. This is the last part. The last part. And so the last part does, let me go to it. The last part does a couple of things, right?
Yes.
The last part is supposed to restate the thesis and summarize the argument. And that's what I was doing there.
What you did in the other paper, the other 17 papers, 17 odd papers.
17 pages?
Yeah.
Well, in my introduction, I stated the thesis of what I was going to do. And in the body, I did the topics, which is what's his work about? Where do I see some areas that need, some improvement?
Okay.
Write it all out.
So you did more critique in your
Yes. Yes.
It's very good, and I hope to aspire to be half that level.
But Kathy, well, you know what? Thank you for asking the questions, and you put me on the spot. But thank you.
I know. I'm sorry. I get curious, but it just helped me. I wanted to see if I could tell what the paper was about by reading the conclusion.
Well, you know what? That's so important, and I'm glad that you brought that up. I think what you want to do is to look at books, because each chapter has a central idea. Each chapter has a body of work, has the body of paragraph, and then it ends up with a conclusion. And so you want to look at maybe a book as an example to be able to do that work. So it's important that you look at chapters as these, that has a central idea. It has, how they expound on it with number of ideas and thinking through the arguments and coming up with a conclusion. So a book is a good way to see, well, did they do a good job on that? So it's a great point, Kathy, and I think that's valuable. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I don't know if anyone else had questions. Questions. Warren?
To post your slides while you talk? Or
Say again?
just to have the last couple of slides up so I can see them. I don't know if that's possible.
Because of time, I won't do that now, but I can send a copy of the notes for that. Yeah. Warren, you had your hand raised. I wanted to.
Yeah. And this is, I've been writing all of my adult life from college to first master's and all my work life and now to seminary. But there are times you hit what I would call writer's block.
Mhm.
And I have had a strategy for curing that for myself. I go for a run. I eat my favorite ice cream.
I better write that one down. Eat my favorite.
Yeah. But I'm finding in this part, the writing has become much more difficult. And those those things aren't working anymore. Any ideals?
Yes. Actually, it's something that I wanted to do here, and we don't have a lot of people, so we could probably good to be this. It's actually having groups that you bounce off your ideas with. So when I was writing my dissertation, and a dissertation is just a really large paper of what you're writing. It's no big deal. It's just more writing. But when I was writing my work, I had writer's block. I had horrible writer's block. I could not write. And what I ended up doing was having to open up to friends or colleagues and say, look, this is where I'm at and I'm stuck. Can you read this piece and come up with any ideas and help me come up with certain ideas or certain places to look at? And when I did that, man, you want to talk about opening up? That was so much valuable information comes from that, because you're sort of like looking at it linearly like this, and you come up with a block. So a colleague helps you to see it in this way. You're like, oh, I never saw that, and it widens your view, and probably gives you certain avenues of where to look at. What it can also do is probably make you say, that's exactly what I don't want, and may lead you to somewhere else. But so there's value in dialoguing with people. And then what that ultimately means is that I need to have talking partners. Talking partners are important to your writing process. For our PPM class, the PPM class is Practice of Prophetic Ministry. It's the 4th year course. And what that does is we look over theological reflection and its importance in practical ministry. Like, here I am doing practical ministry. Where's God in all this? How do we see Jesus and what we've been talking about Jesus reflected in the actual work that we do, so on and so forth. But one of the things we have that we do in that class is that we do group work. The student is required to write, and then they share their writing in the following week in a group session. Everyone has to read each other's work, and then they offer constructive feedback. And so with that, thank you, Sante. She made me laugh on the screen. And so with that, I think you need to have some type of transparency to be able to share your work, so that you can get these new ideas, especially if you're stuck. I will also say, Warren, I'm an introvert. And what that means for me is that I tend not to share my work.
Right.
I had to force myself to do it to see its value. But I was selective on who I showed it to, so that that means the person that I was with can give me something honest without hurting me. Constructive building. And that's me. That's just me being transparent. I mean, hey, I don't just share with anyone. There could be certain people that be like, hey, go here. Better for me.
Yeah.
That's not me.
Yeah. My concern, my the Marler program at NYTS is the smallest program. There's so few of us. So, and since we've been virtual for a whole year, rather, how do you get that real feedback? So
make a study group.
Well, when the class only has 3 people, it's a little hard.
It could be a study group. Just because it's 3.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, Paula. I mean, the writing happens outside of a classroom.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so what if you committed, if it's a small group, it's 3 of you, right? What if you have a conversation that says, look, would you be willing to, stay on Zoom for a couple hours on a Saturday, maybe every other week? And we can just be on Zoom, just leave it there. Or if we use GatherTown here, I use GatherTown for some of those functions. And I'll be like, and if you have any questions, or if you want to say something, or if you want to make sure someone's there, at least we're there. what that opens up is at least a space where it's like, man, I'm having a writer's block. Can you help me out with something? Listen to this. Does this make sense? What are your thoughts and ideas when we think about that? Having that group space to do that. It's not a library setting. I'll tell you that right now. It's not a library setting, but man, is it helpful.
It definitely is. We formed a study group and it helped me so much. I'm telling you, just to put the ideas, it might not even have nothing to do with that class. You could, if you take another classes, maybe you can have a study group with other people.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I was in a special program called HTI, Hispanic Theological Initiative. And so they got Hispanics from different universities, for different people that were doing their doctoral work, and they just had them stay in a room. And here we were in a room, we're all writing literally different subjects, Some are in biblical studies, some are in theology, some were in sociology of religion. And man, they would have us in the room and we're all writing, and they say, okay, we're going to stop now. And I want us to talk about what's the thesis of your doctoral piece, or what's the thesis of the paper that you're writing. That was so difficult because now I was thrust out of my own little world and I had to explain what I wanted to write. But man, was that helpful, because it took me out of my box, and it says that what I'm writing is not meant for me, right? That last piece says your writing has to be reader-centered. It's not meant for you. If it was meant for you, you would write in a diary. But you're writing a reflection paper. You're writing a theological research paper. So that writing isn't only for you, but it's for beyond you. And in a sense, you're writing, but you're not writing to talk about you either. Talking about something else, right? I think we mentioned in the beginning, we want the voice of the divine reflected in our voice by writing, in hopes that it shows the divine mystery. That can come out by way of urban leadership and working out and solving a problem. It could be by some, ethics of the church, for that matter. It could be in the form of a sermon. So when it comes to that writing block, when it comes to that, does it make sense, or the cohesiveness, then the necessity of having that small group that's willing to meet together to do it is important. And that's like a leadership role, right? You have to ask, would you be willing? And you're stepping out of there. And I would also say it doesn't have to be that group. I think something that I need to write out and saying, is there a space that maybe I can open up as as director of the library piece, and that at least an open space that we can all come together. And so that we all in our different groups can come together and just be here present. And if you have any questions, we can open up a breakout room and talk about it, and then you can go back.
It also helps to have like a writing center where you bring your writing to whoever that person is and they can give feedback. There was a point in time where that was done. It was like feedback and also going over like your thought process. Is it coherent? Are you getting your point across? Be nice to see that again.
Actually, we do have that, and that's been open and running. You can actually go online, fill out an appointment. And we actually do Zoom sessions. And we've been doing that even through the pandemic. And that's been on, and that was done there before. We had a writing center before we had when we had the building, we had a writing center. Students did come and get the expert help. And during the pandemic, we had the Zoom sessions. And we had both Aaron, Santea, Joel, and myself would meet with students, and we still do so.
Okay, I didn't see it advertised then.
You can actually, it's advertised and it's actually on the website, and I'll give you the website right now. Yeah. liveresources.nyts.edu. It's a link I just put on the chat. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, what I'm going to do, since you're all
Got it.
This is here. I'm going to show you it so we can all see it. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, there you go. So this is can you see the screen? Okay. So this is, I want to see all of you again. This is the library resources page. So it's libresources.nyts.edu. I put it on the chat. And here is, you can do three things. You can do a couple of things here. You can schedule an appointment with us. You can access the digital theological library. And you can also get research resources, writing resources, and citation help. In the research section, there's a research basics, and it talks you how to navigate just a topic of research. How would, what should I do when I have a subject I need to look at? How do I use the digital theological library? What are keywords? Why are they valuable in helping out searching? What's primary resources? What's secondary resources? Those type of questions. And then I also we've also put in other resources from other spaces to give a different approach. I put a couple of them there. Research tutorial, building your knowledge base. And then we provide research management tools. There's a writing section. In the writing section, like why is theological writing so hard? Some pointers for academic writing. What is a thesis statement? Paula, you mentioned that. What's a thesis statement? There's an article right on there in terms of grammar and style on transitions in your papers, how to do transitions to move from one subject to the next. Documenting and formatting, which is another piece. So it's a video on how to use the Chicago style, of what we call Turabian. It's on the one and the same. And then actual guides that we provide from NYTS, from Doctor of Ministry formatting guides to the master's degrees, MDiv, the MAIR program, MYM, MAPC. I think there should be a Marla one. I don't know why the Marla's not there. I'll look it up and try to get it.
Well, it's not on here.
But we have it, right? I know it should be.
Yeah, there should be one there.
Mm-hmm. And then also these other course-specific handouts, like what's an annotated bibliography? I think if you're in the religious education program or the pastoral care and counseling program, you have to do an annotated bibliography or literature review. So this provides what they are and samples of them. And then there's an exegetical resources handout, which is how to do biblical exegesis. So like, how do you write one? And then finally, citations. How many of us have issues with citations? So with this, there's a video on how to do the breakdown of what citations are. Like, it has an author, it has a title, it has the year it was published, who published it. So it's a breakdown. The problem of plagiarizing, what is plagiarizing, how not to do it. And then we give you an example of pretty much, it's still changing, different types of citations. How do you cite a book? How do you cite a chapter of a book that's found in an edited book? How do you cite a book that has 2 or 3 authors? How do you cite an ebook, which is always the big question, right? Ebooks are always kind of weird. How do you cite them? How do you cite a dissertation or a thesis? How do you cite journal articles? And the list goes on all the way down. So this gives you an example of what a footnote looks like, and how they are in biblical entries. Kathy, was that the sigh? Is that a sigh I heard? Like, oh my gosh, it's so much.
No, not at all. No, not at all.
So with that, I mean, we have resources here, and that citation machine is an excellent one. That Joel just put in a link on the chat, and there's a link called Citation Machine that will help you create the citation or the footnote for you.
My thing with these citations, it's like every year it changes slightly.
I don't think it changes slightly, but there are additions, and then when there's too many additions, they have to rethink, well, how do we do it moving forward? And so, but here's the thing. Once again, you need to read your syllabus, and the syllabus dictates what they're asking. So let's say, the Chicago, this one, Turabian. Turabian is on their 9th edition, right? But if on the syllabus it says, hey, we just need the 7th edition, what they're saying is we're not taking into account the updated stuff. We just,
I thought it was 17.
No, you're talking, that's the Chicago Manual of Style is on 17. Turabian, which is a more succinct version of Chicago, is on its 9th.
Okay.
Yeah, but you're right. Chicago is on 17.
All right.
Chicago's on 17. And then finally, let's see if this is working. Finally, we have what we call the Digital Theological Library. The Digital Theological Library came in 2019, 2020, and it replaced the library that we did have. This library is probably the most used library right now in the United States and probably internationally. We have over 30 colleges, universities, and seminaries using this. We've opened up access through something called the Global DTL, which goes to the rest of the world's seminaries and schools. That's now being used. And it has over 600,000 books. I think the number is probably close to, let me see. It says 553, that's the real number. It's still about 650 actually. 60 million articles, 21,000 journals, databases, which is, man, this is the gold part right here. And subject guides. Subject guides are very valuable because if you don't know something, you can come here and get help.
There you go.
So if you're in labor, yeah, there you go. That's right, Kathy. If you're having trouble, guess what? You can come here. Did you see this change? Did you see the Christian ethics section? And they provide just textbooks that you can start working from. If you even want like beginning ethics, you can probably go look, morality and introduction to ethics. Boom. You could do ethics by the great Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the late Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Doing Christian Ethics from the Margins by Miguel de la Torre, which is a phenomenal book on ethics from a Latino perspective.
Do you get to look at the whole book, or you have to?
Yes, you do get to look at the whole book. So I'm going to click on it. Yeah, we could do it this way. So usually when you click on the book and you're going to read it, this comes up because we don't give access to just everyone. It's access. All students get access. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to select the school that you're in. These are all the schools that are in this one.
Yeah.
Like New York Theological Seminary. And then right here for barcode or student ID, it's your student ID, but it doesn't have the first three parts. So the first three parts says probably MDiv or MYM or MAR or 000. It's not that. It's the last 6 digits of that student ID, which is all number based. And then once you have that, Let's see if it'll let me in, because sometimes it goes. It gives me access to the book.
Let me see, because I tried it yesterday and it didn't work.
So, so this gives access to the book. Now, I do want to say, this is like if you're going to a library, all right? A library, like if you were to pull out the book from the library, that means no one else gets to look at it, right? Once you put that book, you're going to look at it and then you're going to read it. You might take it out. A person could be on this for 4 hours. And if we only have access to one license of the book, then you don't get to, you're going to have to go on it later. So I just want to make you aware of that. This is a library. This is not a personal library that you keep in your house, you know, here. This is a school library, and the school library has the same limitations. And the limitations are, we may have one book, we may have 2 books, or we may have 3 copies of a book. And so we have to be aware of that, okay? And it looks like, I think this book is, let me see. This book is probably open to everyone. It's not limited in any way. Let's look at this one. It'll open up. Once you've logged in, it's going to stay for half an hour, and then you can just get the books that you need. So just look at this one, just to be very particular. It says your institution has unlimited access to this book. What that means is that I can have 20 copies open. It doesn't matter. We have unlimited access. But sometimes this says we have 1 copy of the book, or we have 3 copies of the book. You want to be aware of that, because like any library, if you have 3 copies, then you only have 3 copies. Then you have to wait till someone checks it back in.
What about when they ask for money? I saw something about funding, and I was looking for something. It said something financial.
Nothing. The library will not ask you for any financial piece, so you'd have to be very specific with me. However, please remember that since we have purchased it from multiple publishers, if you go outside of the scope of what that book is, then chances are that might happen. You know, sign in, become a member. Those things could still be there.
Cambridge Encyclopedia, and it was looking up Protestant Reformation, and then I went deeper into like Martin Luther, Calvin, and then someone else, like specifically what they wrote. And then some of the sources on the encyclopedia, it was open, but then when you get to whatever other volume or something, it said you can't, or something about
Correct.
that. Okay.
And that's functioning as it should be, because we don't get access to everything. We have access to a lot of information, but we don't get access to everything. So what we show you and what we provide for you is what you do get access to. But we can also show you stuff that you don't have access to, and then you can find ways of getting at it. And that, you know, that's part of research. If you're researching on Martin Luther and you're going really deep and we don't have an item, maybe another college or university has it. And so we can provide you that information, and you can, you know, continue researching there and do that. So that's the power of this digital library. We give you access to what we have, but we also give you access to where those resources are also available, but that we don't have access to.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I don't know if there were any other questions to this. Oh, many times you can read the chapters individually online. Yes, what Joel was saying. You can read these online. Sometimes you can save portions of it as PDF files. So you can print them out so you can have it if the site gets on there. But it's a great resource to have. I mean, we have a wealth of information, and I think you should take advantage of it to really expand your knowledge of the areas that you want to be knowledgeable in. And that's what seminary is there too, you know. Yeah, that like William was saying, the education part of it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions? Oh, Yeah, I know what I'm gonna do.
So the writing Tuesdays and Thursdays I see on the calendar.
Correct. So we have them open on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so you could set up an appointment for them. So the services we provide, so when I did schedule an appointment, the services we provide, writing services, outlining, developing a thesis, grammar help, framing your paper, how to use the digital theological library, data services help, how to use advanced research. So that's the areas that we help in.